Hello, good morning, everyone. We're just going to be waiting a few minutes to have everybody admitted into the event, but welcome. We're excited to have you all here. One of the things we were thinking it might be nice if everybody could do while we're just waiting to have everybody come in is if you could introduce yourself in the chat window, just your name and maybe the organization you're coming from. If you're coming from an organization, that would be awesome. All right. So it's about 10:05. So I'm going to get things started here, but thank you so much for everybody, to everybody for introducing yourselves in our chat window. Really excited to see everyone who's joining us from all corners of the province, many different organizations. Thank you. Um, and welcome to our first live session of our annual general meeting for 2021. If you've been following along, we had a few videos sent out in the last couple of days. A nice welcome from myself and our board chairperson, Catherine Doan, and some program updates from our program and resource manager, Mercedes Unwin, to share the successes that we had this last year, thanks to all of the support that we received from every one of you. I'm Taylor Selig, and I'm AgScape's executive director. I've been with the organization for over 6 years now, and I actually just took on this role in October. So I'm excited to be coming to you today to celebrate our virtual AGM and our 30th anniversary. It's a milestone for us this year. And part of that presentation that we wanted to show you at the beginning was just a little bit glimpse into some of the work we've done over that 30 years. It's amazing to be here now and just the differences we've been a part of in education and in agriculture. We know it's a busy time for everyone, so we appreciate you all taking that time to join us today. And we hope that you're all safe and healthy. We're missing being able to see everybody in person, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us virtually. Really, we know that the world continues to change, and we want you to know that we'll be there continuing to provide these unique virtual opportunities, both on the education side and the agriculture side. This year, we chose the theme of our AGM to be Thriving in a Changing World. And that was to celebrate that major milestone for our organization, our 30th anniversary of leading agriculture and food education across the province. We wanted to take the time to reflect on the flexibility and adaptability that AgScape embraced over that time, and the importance that our partners and supporters had in helping us to meet the challenges of COVID-19 over this past year. In the past year, there have been many changes, as I mentioned, within the education system, how people learn, and we've developed new ways to engage young people to show them the optimism and the innovation for the future of our industry. So really grateful for that. To get things started off here, I do want to thank our sponsors for today's event. And one of those is PH Milling, who's our broadcast sponsor, helping us to bring these live portions of our virtual AGM to everyone today and next Wednesday. We're also grateful to, as we have an incredible lineup with us today, including a keynote presentation from Isaac LeClair at Farm Credit Canada, their social media and virtual communication expert, and a panel of education sector professionals sharing their stories of the shift to virtual. And with that, I want to thank the OFA for sponsoring our panel presentation. I know it's going to be a great conversation and very collaborative, and we'll be able to share some of the unique ways that educators have been working to engage their students over the past year and succeed in the new virtual education environment. Next up, I wanted to share our agenda for the day. So if you have a look here on our slide, we're going to go through, we've been through our welcome. We're going to go through some housekeeping items. And then I'm going to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Isaac LeClair. And he'll go through his exciting presentation to share, best practices for communicating in a virtual world and some of the experiences he's been having. Then we'll have our panel presentation, again, talking about best practices for success in a virtual education environment. And then a thank you and closing remarks to all of you for joining us and our supporters for making this possible. Now to go through those housekeeping items I was talking about. Our biggest ask is if you could please keep your cameras and off and microphones muted for the duration of event. If you have any questions, please direct those to the chat. It just helps us to keep the focus on our speaker and panelists so that we can really take the time to learn what they have to share. From a viewing perspective, for best general viewing, if you're on your desktop, click the View button at the top right of your screen in Zoom and select Gallery from the drop-down menu. While presentations are going on using slides like I am right now, if you select the side-by-side speaker option, that's really your best option for having a look at both the presentation and the speaker. And during those presentations, you can also adjust the size of the screen that's being shared by going to the View Options button that's at the top of your screen on a desktop and selecting Zoom ratio. If you have any questions or comments on the presentations or you have any questions on your technical experience, please use the chat feature by clicking on the speech bubble at the bottom of the at the bottom of your screen. And our staff will be monitoring and happy to help. Please note that there's going to be a Q&A portion following both our keynote speaker and our panel. So we're excited to receive your questions and feel free to send those in at any time. When you're sending in your question, if your name already isn't on your handle for the video, you can include your name when asking a question. That'd be great. And if there's anyone you'd like to connect with directly, I wanted to mention that there's a direct chat feature in the chat box, and you can just select them from the drop-down menu there. If you have to leave early for any reason, but still have questions about the event, please feel free to send a chat in the chat window and we'll make sure we get back to you later, or send them to info@agscape.ca and we'll make sure to get back to you. Just a quick note to mention that this session is being recorded and will be shared for viewing after the event so that everybody's aware of that. And we'd love it if you were able to join us on social media using the hashtag AgScape AGM21 to share your experience today. Now we're almost ready to get started, but we'd like to begin this event by providing you with a little bit of the interactive experience that our teacher ambassadors provide in the classroom every day during their virtual lessons. For that, I'll need to invite my colleague, Cassie Brunsfeld, AgScape's program assistant, to share her screen.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm here to showcase some of the innovative, and I do want to briefly share an amazing accomplishment yesterday. So at 1:30 in the afternoon, I got to do a tour of our organic dairy farm, and it was about a 40-minute presentation, and we had over 18,000 students registered and over 990 teachers. So that was absolutely incredible. So students, teachers, the general public, as well as some industry members. So this was definitely a great feat for AgScape and really emphasizes the positive direction that we're going for in 2021. So in addition to this good news story, we are going to be playing an AgScape themed Kahoot game, which is a common interactive software recognized by teachers and youth, as well as used in AgScape programs. So for this game, we recommend using a cell phone, tablet, or your computer. On the screen and in the chat, you will see directions to a website with a pin, and I will pull that up in just a second for you. Please follow the instructions and go to kahoot.it and enter the pin to play. As we are waiting for everyone to join, the focus of the game is that you will see questions with multiple choice answers pop up on your device. You have about 20 seconds to select the correct answer, with points being awarded to who answers correctly and the fastest. At the end of the game, we will share who takes first place, so do your best. So I'm going to share my screen here for you. Alrighty, you guys should be able to see that now. So at the top there, It says go to www.kahoot.it, and this is your pin up here in the top.
We're excited to share this because I think oftentimes we'll talk a lot about some of the lessons and resources that we're sharing with students, but you don't really get to experience them. So this is one of the cool interactive resources that we've been able to use this past year. As much as we're excited to be able to get back in person, being able to use some of the tools like this has really made our lessons interactive for students.
All right, get those fingers ready. Here we go. So who is the chair of AgScape's board of directors? Taylor Selleck, Bon Jovi, Elmo, or Catherine Doan?
Using the shapes on your screen, make sure you select the correct shape, and you're also being marked on timing. So the faster you select that correct answer, the more points you'll get.
All right. So Catherine Doan, one Bon Jovi. Oh. All right. Next up. What commodity was the first virtual food and farm tour of Canadian Agriculture Literacy Month 2021? Was it aquaculture, dairy, maple syrup, or grain? The correct answer was maple syrup.
I think everybody really liked your dairy presentation too.
I think so.
I found a lot of those answers.
It is on YouTube if you would like to watch it later. All right, question number 3. In agri-trekking, you learn about growing seasons. Name the location with the growing season ranging from 100 to 145 days. Is it Lanark, Sudbury, Kenora, or Haliburton?
Testing your growing knowledge here.
The correct answer was Sudbury. All right, question number 4. In 2020, how many youths
really taking the lead.
How many youth did AgScape reach through its programs, resources, and events? 409,472, 311,587, 442,136, or 387,561.
Those are some very specific numbers. So we're looking for a specific answer.
So it was 409,472. Here we go.
Melissa's jumped in and taken the lead.
What is the name of AgScape's flagship program? Agriculture Ambassador Program, Agriculture and Food Education Program, Agriculture and Food Literacy Program, or the Teacher Ambassador Program?
I think you gave a slight hint on that one, Cassie.
Was it in my voice?
Your voice.
All right, so Teacher Ambassador Program is the correct one. Oh, Melissa's going to hold on to that spot. Here we go, number 6. In 2020, AgScape launched the virtual camp experience. How many youth did it reach? 4,279, 4,678, 5,032, or 3,259?
These people are fast.
They are.
Those answers are coming in quick.
The correct answer was 5,032. Let's see. Oh, Melissa's still holding that top spot. Here we go. Last question. And it's for double points. What anniversary is AgScape celebrating this year? 30, 25, 40, or 45?
I think if people don't get this right, I wasn't doing my job as a speaker.
The answers for this one came in the fastest, I think, of all of them. Correct answer was 30. So let's see who our winners are. We have Autumn in third place. We have John G in second. And in first place, we have Melissa. And Melissa is from Ag in the Classroom, Canada. So thank you everyone for playing. I hope you enjoyed that. And I'm going to pass it back on to Taylor.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking us through that, Cassie. That was super fun. Nice little challenge to start off the day is a good thing to get the blood running. Before I introduce our special guest speaker for today, I also wanted to thank our Platinum members and our AGM sponsors for the year. All of our AGM sponsors, incredibly grateful for the support that you've given us in order to be able to share our impacts for the year. Your support means so much, and thanks to all of our members over the year, we're happy to report that with your support in 2020, we were able to reach over 5,000 teachers through our programs and resources and provide over 400,000 student engagements, as Cassie just shared during our game right there. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Again, we'll have time for Q&A after the presentation, but please feel free to post your questions in the chat as they come up. Isaac LeClair is a program manager and consultant at Farm Credit Canada. He leads the online game plan for agriculture more than ever, a department that creates positivity, unity, and mobilization within Canadian agriculture. His job is to get people inspired to talk about farming and their food. Isaac was born in Charlottetown, PEI, and raised in Regina, Saskatchewan. Isaac's fascination with advertising and technology began in elementary school and influenced him in earning a degree in marketing from the University of Regina. After several years of serving on the marketing team for the Business Student Society and the JDC West at the U of R, Isaac transitioned to the world of advertising with Brown Communications, working with a wide range of companies including Sask Power, SaskTel, and Access Communications. Today, Isaac continues to explore opportunities in advertising and social marketing to bring Canadians and agriculture closer together. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Isaac LeClair.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Taylor. It is currently 8:23 a.m. here in Regina, Saskatchewan, and as I look outside, I see snow falling. So that's unfortunate, but I've had my morning coffee. I'm feeling energized. I'm feeling good to go. And I'm excited to talk to you all about communications and all that's changed in the last year, right? Lots changed for all of us, and I actually already see something that might be wrong with this slide. There we go. That looks better. So over this past year, there's been a lot of changes to the way that we communicate with one another, the way that we interpret communications, even the level of trust that we have with the stuff that we see online. But I think throughout today's presentation, I should be arming you with enough different communication approaches that should make us all feel a little bit more confident. So before I go into that, I want to talk about a story that happened to me about 4 years ago. And it's a story that I know a few of you on this call have actually heard me tell before. And that's because this has kind of had a really big impact on my life and the way that I've approached the different communications campaigns that I've worked on over the last 4 years. So this here is a picture of downtown Tokyo, and Tokyo is insane. It's massive. There's as many people living in Tokyo as in all of Canada. So as you can imagine, getting around there can be a little bit tough. And I was here with my parents actually 4 years ago, and our goal was to eat at as many Michelin star rated restaurants as possible. So Michelin star meaning kind of the upper tier of restaurants. So we found one that fit within our budget, and then we were a bit confused when we showed up to a completely empty mall and to literally a hole in the wall that was right beside the mall's bathrooms. And as you can see, there's a close sign there. So we're not really sure what to do. We actually are about to leave and find a different place to eat for lunch. And then somebody emerged from that curtain and said, "Oh, please come inside." So me and my parents entered this restaurant that's about the size of a small bedroom, and there are 4 seats. So we sit down and we're handed a menu, and we are able to choose between deep fried pork and a different version of deep fried pork. So I knew I would be eating deep fried pork that day. But I can say 4 years later, this is still the best meal that I've had in my entire life. And it's a memory that I will remember forever, not really because of the food, but because of what happened right after we ate. So my father and I and my mother, we get up and we're speaking with the waitress, and my father's paying. And beside my father, a wooden panel in the wall opens up and a chef walks out. And the chef's probably 65 years old, goes up to my father, grabs both of his hands and looks him in the eyes and says, "Thank you so much for coming here today and eating with us." And then he goes up to my mother and does the same thing. Goes up to me, grabs my hands, looks me in the eyes and says, "Thank you so much for coming here today." So the three of us are kind of shook. We don't really know how to react to this. This is a Michelin star rated restaurant, meaning that this is automatically one of the best chefs in the world. And he individually came out to thank each one of his guests. And as my father's about to respond, another chef walks out, and then another chef walks out, and then another chef walks out, and then a 90-year-old man walks out, who we later found out was the father of all of the chefs and the waitress. So this super intense memory for me is because of this really special one-on-one human connection that I had with this business. So for my career, I've had the pleasure of working on some pretty big communication campaigns within the Canadian agriculture industry. I'm always trying to recreate moments like this. And I know the idea of creating moments like this, in-person moments, probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now, especially given the last 12, 13, 14 months. And it's because, I mean, you've heard this buzzword a million times in the last year, and it's true. Times have become unprecedented. And in fact, they're actually so unprecedented that the word unprecedented has become unprecedented. That's the most time that word's ever been used in a sentence. This is actually a Google Trends chart of the popularity of that word since COVID. And as you can see, people love it. And that's because it's true. So the pandemic and COVID has impacted all of us in different ways. But if we are to look at some commonalities, here's what they would look like. So globally, every single person on the planet has increased their internet usage by at least 40 to 100%. In first world countries like Canada, it's closer to that 100% range. So think about that. We've increased the amount that we're on the internet by 100%. And for a lot of us, at least 70% of the people on this call, we are now on the internet for at least 1 extra hour a day than we were before pre-pandemic. And for nerds like me, we're probably in this 3-hour range, right? So in the last 12 months, that's been a really big impact on us. And so at face value, when we think about this, could this be a positive from a communication standpoint? Like the people we're trying to reach are now more reachable than ever before because they're online. I think we all know the answer to this question is actually no. And it's because of overstimulation, right? Just like this notification is going up and up and up, this is kind of how we're feeling in our heads and in our lives right now. The amount that we're online and the amount of different competing messages that we're seeing is causing confusion. And a very good example of how this can happen is actually the past 12, 13, 14 months of the different communication that we've been receiving from different health organizations. So when I was preparing for this presentation, I was trying to figure out all of the different ways that health bodies have been sharing information with us over the 12 months. And I think I have it narrowed it down to 2 different categories. So those are public health orders and public health guidelines. One is a legal requirement. So that being, if a provincial health organization says that restaurants can only operate at 25% capacity, if they operate above that, you can get fined, right? That's a legal requirement. A public health guideline would be something like last summer when we were still able to have people in our homes. The best advice from a provincial health organization would be still, whenever possible, try to meet with people outside. So it's their best advice. And I think when I lay it out like that, it kind of makes sense. There should be those 2 different options. But the issues here come when we think about all of the different ways that we're receiving this information. We're getting information from our parents and our crazy uncles and our siblings and our employers, from different global health organizations, from different countries, from the media. And because of that, the terminology is getting flipped and skewed, and it's kind of hard to figure out which one is a legal requirement, which one's a piece of advice, which one is something that I absolutely need to do, which one is something that I don't have to do. And because of that, confusion. So 2 weeks ago when I'm getting ready for this presentation, I went on Google and I was trying to find all the different terms that were getting thrown around, kind of mixed in with orders and guidelines. And I was finding public health restrictions, public health limitations, public health considerations, recommendations, requirements, regulations, public health enforceable measures. So as you can see, I don't know the difference between all of these extra ones. And I think for all of us, it can create confusion. Okay, question time. I want you all to go into the chat right now. Yes or no question. Do you trust the information that you see online? And online meaning when you're on a news website, when you're on social media, whatever it is. So yes or no question. I'm seeing a lot of no's. No, 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 no. Yes, no, no, no. Okay, depends on the source. So I actually have some data to support all these answers. So thank you for all of those answers. In Canada, this is actually how that looks. So I'm about to show you a very busy chart, but I will break it down for you. So this is some research done by Edelman. And the main thing that I want us to all look at on this slide is right here when COVID started. So since COVID, there's been a really big drop in the ways that we trust information that we're seeing online. So in the last 10 years, this is the least amount that we've ever trusted social media, least amount that we've ever trusted search engines and traditional media, and essentially the lowest we've ever trusted owned media. So almost every single media source online is in a distrusted category right now. So as you can assume, this is also creating another barrier for all of us who are trying to interact with like customers or even industry peers online, right? Because if people aren't trusting the information they're seeing, then how can you communicate effectively? Okay, everybody go in the chat again. Question number 2 here. For those of us that used to work in an office setting or with other people, and since COVID, we are now working from home. Are you guys working more now that you're at home? Okay, this is the complete opposite, hey? Yes, 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 yes. So once again, I have some data to support this. In Canada, the answer is yes. So compared to when we were in an office setting, the average person is attending 1 extra meeting a day and actually working for 1 full extra hour a day. So when you think about that, I mean, the first time I saw this data, 1 extra hour a day seemed very reasonable because that is definitely what I was working, I thought, until I extrapolated that over the last year. So think about that. Since COVID started, all of us have worked an average of 31.4 extra full 8-hour workdays, which is kind of crazy, right? So if anybody on this call, on top of all of those other barriers I talked about, is also feeling maybe a little bit run down or a little bit overwhelmed, I mean, you're not alone, and a lot of people are feeling that way. So if I'm to set the stage here again, we're all online longer than we ever have before, and it's creating overstimulation. We also seem to not trust the information that we're seeing online. And when we are online, we're probably tired and a little bit overworked. So the way that we interpret stuff is becoming a bit difficult, right? And all those things put together can create a lot of situations where a loss of context can become a very real thing. And a very good example of this is something that Burger King tried to do last month during International Women's Day. So Burger King got their hands on some data, and it said that only 20% of chefs in professional kitchens were women. And so that's a clear gap, right? That should definitely be closer to a 50-50 number. So Burger King came up with a really good idea. They said, let's find a way to empower female employees so that they can pursue a career in professional kitchens. So they created a scholarship program, and they wanted to make the announcement on International Women's Day. So that sounds like a really good idea, right? They identified a clear gap, they came with a proactive solution, and they picked a really good day to make that announcement. Let's see how they decided to make that announcement. Pretty sure we all feel the same way about this. As you can imagine, this was not received well at all. So people were saying the social media person there needs to be fired. Their communication teams deserve to be fired. Their account must have been hacked. This is absolutely crazy, right? And I honestly don't know what happened here. Obviously a huge lapse of judgment, and maybe it didn't go through the normal approval process. And I will give them some slack. They did try to kind of clean it up afterwards, explaining what the intent was behind it. But this is a perfect situation of a loss of context, right? I know some people were trying to defend Burger King here and said, so when you look at this, Twitter does only have a 240 character limit, so they probably didn't have the ability to fit this all within one tweet. But I actually did a test and it definitely fits with 9 characters to spare. So if you feel like Ralph right now, I completely understand. I'm sorry for starting the day off with so much doom and gloom, but I think it's very important that we appreciate the fact that we have a lot of communication barriers in a way right now, right? Things are not the way they used to be. We're all online longer than we ever have before. We can be confused with all the overstimulation. We don't trust the information we're seeing, and we're all overworked, which can create a lot of situations where there is a loss of context, right? So I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed because I'm about to present some communication principles that we can all apply to the way that we're either communicating with our coworkers, or if we're communicating with industry partners online, or even if we're running large-scale social media campaigns, which will be a lot of my examples. One thing that I really want to highlight is something that happened in the last year. And I was thinking about this actually last night, and it kind of blew my mind. So I think about in between 1991 and 2019, when my life thus far, how many video chats that I had been on, not including FaceTimes, honestly, maybe 30 to 50 in that entire time range. And then when I think about the beginning of COVID until now, I mean, I easily was on 1,000, if not 1,500 video calls last year, right? And that crazy amount of tech adoption that all of us on this call have been forced to just jump into and learn has been super cool. But one thing that we need to remember is that we as humans, there's some communication cues that we're really good at when we're in person with people, right? Picking up on body language and picking up on like facial expressions and all the little special things that happen when we're with each other in person. So when we're given technology, the best way to use it from a communication standpoint is as a complement to the things that we're already good at as human communicators, not as a full substitute. So yes, communication or technology is great because it can create efficiencies, but if we rely too heavily on it, we kind of lose the point of being good communicators. And I'll touch on that. So the 3 communication principles that I really want to touch on today are these 3 ideas. And if there's one rolling theme in today's presentation, it's that in this current situation, when we are very rarely in person with people, the best way to communicate is to simulate and pretend that we're communicating with people in person. Use the same strategies that we would back when we were able to do it in person. And I'll touch on these. So the first one is this idea of being friendly. So this foreign scene here is something that we all used to be able to do. And I want us to pretend we are currently at a dinner party. So once again, let's open up this chat. Let's think about something. Let's pretend we are about to go to a dinner party that there'll be 10 people there. You're going with your best friend, but there's going to be 10 people there that you've never met before. But you're kind of excited and you're optimistic, and your goal at this dinner party is to leave there with some new friends. So what would some strategies be? What are some simple things you would do when you are going to a party and you want to make some friends? So please put that in the chat. Pay for drinks, bring a gift, be friendly, ask people about themselves, introduce yourself, be nice, smile. Yeah, connections of interests, ask questions. Yeah, these are all perfect, right? And it's funny how when I ask a simple question like this, all of us know the answer instantly, right? All of us know the answers because as humans, these are things we're good at. So we would say nice outfit to people, right? We would ask them about things that they're interested in and then talk to them about those things. We definitely wouldn't only talk about ourselves. That would be weird. We wouldn't ignore people for no reason. That would be weird. We wouldn't be rude out of the blue, right? That would not be very nice. And so we know all these things. But then when we think about these communication principles, how often are we applying these to external communication? when we're trying to get people to read our newsletters, when we're trying to get people to respond to a social media campaign, right? We quite often don't really think about how it's the same thing, but it is the same thing. And especially in a time right now when we're not with people in person, if we can lean on the same things that make us good communicators in situations like this, and this idea of being friendly and communicating with people the same way that you would communicate with your friends can be incredibly effective. So to give us an example, I kind of wanted to walk through how we could apply friendly behaviors in a video chat setting. So one thing I don't want to go through is kind of more of the power user stuff, like yes, I have a microphone so my voice sounds good, and I'm sitting in front of a light source so that my face is lit up, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm looking eye level into the camera. That stuff is less important. The real important things here are trying to simulate the type of stuff that we were doing in person. So this first one I'm going to mention is probably going to sound a little bit weird, but a really good example for this is what Cassie did at the beginning of this presentation, right? She tried to start it off with something that was like fun and light and something that could kind of help build rapport with the group. And that's this idea of chit chat. So if I think about the biggest loss that we've had since COVID and we've moved in-person meetings to virtual meetings, is we're still doing a good job at following the agenda, but we've lost out on all the beautiful things that happened before the meeting and after the meeting, right? The way that you build rapport with your customers and your peers is by talking about stuff that isn't on the agenda, right? It's the way that I build trust in my coworkers and other people is by learning about their personal lives, right? And sharing personal stories and talking about pop culture and the weather and sports and all that stuff, right? So as important as it is to get the work done and follow the agenda, my best piece of advice for everybody is, if you have an hour-long meeting, and I know we're all in a situation where most of us are attending one extra meeting a day and working an extra hour, so our time is sensitive, but if you have an hour-long meeting and you think you can get it done in 45 minutes, try to keep that last 15 minutes and throw the agenda in the garbage can and just talk about life, right? Build rapport, it's very important. Second thing is this idea of being professional. And this is one that is definitely a very interesting one, because I think about how much the idea of professionalism has changed since COVID. Like, I think of myself right now. I am sitting here with 2 cell phones and a screen here and a screen here, and I try all day long when I'm meetings not to be distracted. But how is that fair to the person that I'm meeting on the other side, right? And when I was in in-person meetings before, I would never pull up my cell phone in front of somebody, right? That's incredibly rude. But it's definitely very easy for us to, when we're on a call right now, to be like, and be working on our second monitor. So we owe it to the people that we're meeting with to give them their full attention, especially if we expect that level of attention in return. And speaking of distractions, there's also another thing that's kind of been a new COVID situation, and it's unintended interruptions. So all of us are in different situations right now. I personally am in a condo with one other person, and we're working from home, and there are very limited interruptions throughout the day. But for some people, they're at home with 4 kids and 2 dogs and a cat, and sometimes you can't control the fact that you're going to be interrupted throughout the day. So I have an example here, and it's an experience I had when I was at a conference in Calgary, and I think it's a very good example of how to be professional when an interruption takes place. So I'm in Calgary. I'm at a really big social media conference, and there is a director there from Google, and she's giving a presentation on YouTube and video advertising. And she's a new mom. So she had given birth to her baby about 2 or 3 months prior, and she brought her newborn baby and her husband to Calgary for the presentation. And she also brought them to the auditorium. So she's 5 minutes into her presentation, and her baby just starts bawling, like uncontrollably. And the way that she responded to this interruption, I think, was a masterclass in professionalism. So in front of everybody, in front of 300 people, she invites her husband to bring the baby to the front. And obviously, the second that she gets the baby stops crying. But then she continues to give her 45-minute presentation with the baby in her arms, right? Like, perfect presentation, super engaging, just with a baby in her hands. And I think all of us can agree that is a very professional response to an unintended interruption. So the main thing that I want us to all remember here is, don't be hard on yourself if there's an interruption on your end that you can't control. Grant some grace to anybody that is on the other line from you. If a dog walks in, It's not the uninterrupted interruption that's unprofessional, it's your response to that that's unprofessional. So if I had a pet ferret and my pet ferret kept on running across my screen this morning, and every time it did, it made me talk about ferrets for 5 minutes, that's unprofessional. But the fact that it happened in this work from home environment, that's not unprofessional. So let's be more kind to ourselves and kinder to others. So this idea of being friendly from a communication standpoint is something that I've really tried to ingrain within the Agriculture More Than Ever brand. And throughout my time within the Canadian agriculture industry, I've had the opportunity to work with some pretty big brands like Agriculture More Than Ever and Canada's Agriculture Day and FCC and the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. And whenever I'm working on large scale communications campaigns, I always try to focus on this idea of being friendly. So communicating with people the same way that you would communicate with your friends. And with Agriculture More Than Ever, if any of you are unfamiliar with what it is, it's essentially an online social media brand. And the purpose of it is to create a sense of community and really instill pride and positivity within the industry. So we want farmers and food processors to feel proud about the fact that they do what they do. So if you look at the way we communicate with people, we speak to people like they are friends. We've built enough rapport that when people direct message us, they say hey to our first name, hey Debbie, hey David, hey Isaac, and we always respond with who is the person that's communicating with them. We also don't just talk about what our mandate is, right? We don't just talk about our business. We involve, because these are our friends, right? We involve them with stuff that's happening around the office. So when we got a new office plant, we actually let our followers name Macho Man Planty Savage, who was planted in a watering can and I'm pretty sure died because we forgot to water it, ironically. We also have insiders with all of our followers, just like you would with your friends. So we can say something super vague like Future Farmer Friday, and our followers know, oh, that means I'm going to send in cute pictures of my kids today. We also try to celebrate milestones with our followers because they are our friends. So 2 years ago, this couple from Alberta on Canada's Agriculture Day announced the fact that they were pregnant. And since then, we've been providing updates on how the baby's doing, Kinsey, who is now a 1.5 years old, right? So being friendly in your communication is easier than you think. Just treat the people that you're communicating with the same way that you would with your friends, give them that same level of respect, try to build that rapport, and it should be beneficial. So communication principle number 2 is this idea of celebrating people. And once again, this is something that we've ingrained within the Agriculture More Than Ever brand. And what we try to say is when we are storytelling, when we're trying to get a message out, we want to make sure that our followers or our customers or our industry peers are the hero of the story we're trying to tell. And that might sound a bit vague, but I have some examples that kind of explain what I'm saying here. But this is really our philosophy, right? We love our followers, celebrate them whenever we can. So a really good way to kind of show the difference in celebrating people and not celebrating people is if we take a look at the way that some domestic car companies and some non-domestic car companies talk about their products. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm not saying one vehicle is cool and one sucks. I'm just saying you will definitely see a clear distinction in the way that these ads are laid out. So this first one, let's take a look at this. It's a Ford F-150 with a lot of cool features. I think when I take a look at this ad, I say this is a super cool truck and Ford is awesome, right? Ford is awesome because of all these cool features. If we look at the opposite of this, what the heck is this saying? It's saying you are an explorer. Maybe you're a good dad. You like being adventurous. You like being a weekend warrior. It's saying you are awesome. Let us help you become more awesome or keep being awesome, right? And that little switch in the way that these ads are framed means that if you are somebody that sees yourself in this ad, in this message, you're way more likely to remember it and you're way more likely to act on it. So you're probably more likely to buy a car. And so if we're to think about this approach, think of yourself as the vehicle, right? So whether it's a newsletter or a social media campaign or even like an internal communication, you're the vehicle to celebrate the people that you're talking to. And doing this can be very easy. One very, very, very easy way we've done this with Agriculture More Than Ever is just in how we've kind of rebranded the way that we've approached Instagram. So in the past, it was very heavily branded. And if you look at it, I think it says we are awesome. Ag More Than Ever is awesome. If you look at it now, we're celebrating our followers and we're telling people that you are awesome. Please join this community because we're a big happy family who like to support each other. So one more example of a Canadian company that does a very good job at celebrating people is ENDY. And I'm not sure if any of you have gone through the mattress in a box delivery thing. I personally sleep on a Casper. So I went through this situation when I got this giant cardboard cylinder sent to my door, and you kind of open it up and you have this giant caterpillar that slowly grows on your floor for a few days, and it smells really weird for about a week, but very comfortable. And I'm happy I made that purchase. And ENDY, if you guys have probably noticed them on social media because they have been killing it the last few years. And it's because of how they celebrate people. And it's because they put a lot of trust in their customers. So they trust their customers so much that they will actually take the reviews that their customers have written verbatim, word for word, and turn them into like large scale ad campaigns, both digital ads and even in-person ads. So here's an example of some ads that ENDY have paid for in the last few years. Kelly D. Drunk me bought this mattress. I love drunk me. Brian H. from Guelph. He said, yes, queen. It is like sleeping on a queen-sized marshmallow. And Matt W. said, it comfy, it good, it noise, it thick, and it tasty. So think about Kelly and Brian and Matt. This interaction they had with this brand is probably going to make them loyal for the rest of their lives. They probably talk to their friends about this like crazy, right? And because of this, treating their customers like their friends and like putting enough faith and trust into their customers that they are using their words as an ad, as their form of communication is very effective, right? And that's why they've been doing so well as a brand. So that's communication tip number 2. Whenever possible, try to celebrate people. Our philosophy at Egg More Than Ever is try to make sure that the person you're trying to communicate with is the hero of the story. So that moves us to number 3. Yes, I also noticed that that person's name was Kelly D. Kelly. So number 3, connect one-on-one. This is really related to that example that I gave at the very beginning. So think about 4 years later, I'm still telling people about that story I had with those chefs in Japan, right? Made me feel special, made me feel connected with those people. So how, especially right now during COVID, when we can really never be with each other in person, can we have those really strong one-on-one connections with people? So an example of a company that's done a phenomenal job at this over the years is actually Kentucky Fried Chicken, surprisingly. So this example that I'm giving you happened a few years ago, and it's related to their Twitter account. As you can see, they're being followed by a lot of people, 1.5 million. But no one really ever noticed that they were only following 11 people, and no one really ever put any thought into it. But if we are to do kind of a deep dive into this, you'll see something a bit weird. So they're following 11 people, right? If we are to break these into different categories, I guess we can see they're following 6 dudes named Herb. And then anybody who's a fan of like 90s pop music can all say they're also following the 5 Spice Girls. And if we are to do some math here, 6 plus 5 is 11 herbs and spices, right? That's the Colonel's secret spice recipe, which is pretty phenomenal. So a few years ago, somebody cracked the KFC Da Vinci Code and they tweeted about it. And as you can imagine, this blew up. So back in 2017, this was actually the largest tweet of the year at 750,000 likes, which is pretty cool. And as we can all imagine, this really blew up. So news sources from across the world picked up this story. And I love this example, not really because of what happened, it's how KFC responded to all this publicity. So if you're getting all this PR, it probably would be really hard to not brag about this, right? To not place an ad by talking about 11 herbs and spices and how funny and cool you are. What KFC did, kind of like that experience that I had in Japan, they tried to use this as a situation where they could have one really big impact on one person. So they commissioned an artist to paint a picture of the guy who made that tweet getting a piggyback ride from Colonel Sanders, and they sent it to his house. That's all they did. And as you can imagine what happened next, this person loved it. And They tweeted about it. And then once again, this got picked up by news sources across the world. So KFC probably generated tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of free publicity and earned media. And all they did was follow 11 people on Twitter and sent a painting to somebody's house. And that goes to show you the power of those one-on-one connections. I know people like me, where I'm like a career advertiser, social media communications person. It's hard to not chase the big numbers because those are the ones that are the most fun. But if you have really strong one-on-one connections with people, those are the ones that will serve you way better going into the future, because they'll feel loyalty to you. They'll feel like your friend. They'll be more engaged with what you have to say. Like they're more likely to open your emails. All that stuff is important to consider. Okay, so those are the 3 communication principles. If we're to review these super quickly, be friendly. So try your best to communicate with people the same way that you would with your friends. Number 2, celebrate people. Try to make sure that the people you're talking to are the hero of the story you're trying to tell. And number 3 is connect one-on-one, which I know seems tough during COVID, but try your best to focus on one-on-one connections. And like I had said, the big theme here is trying our best to keep communicating like we used to a year and a half ago and stop relying so heavily just on digital communications. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and it's related to this photo right here. So when we think about this past year, a lot has changed. And a big thing that has changed is how the average Canadian looks at food, right? Looks at agriculture and food processing and the entire Canadian food supply chain. And for a lot of Canadians, this was the first time they ever experienced any levels of food security and food insecurity, sorry. And seeing images like this on the news, or even going to your own grocery store and experiencing this, was kind of an eye-opener for a lot of people, right? People were on the news seeing videos of milk being dumped, or piles of potatoes having to rot because it couldn't make it to food processing places. And because of that, a lot of Canadians were now thinking about food differently than ever before, right? There was a new spotlight that was put on our industry. And one piece of data that I try to keep track with every year is something that the Canadian Center for Food Integrity does, and it's tracking the opinions that Canadians have towards the Canadian food system. And last year's data shows us that it's kind of a 50-50 split between Canadians that think the food system is going in the right direction and Canadians that think it's going in the wrong direction, or they don't know. But this actually looks pretty exciting when we break this back to the past 5 years. Because as we can see, since COVID, we're actually at a 5-year high. This is actually the highest the opinions have been of Canadians ever in terms of where they think the food system is going. And a big reason for that was because of COVID, right? Now that people are thinking about us. And there's some additional research that was done actually by FCC we did this with Abacus data from Toronto. We did a survey to also see how Canadians thought we responded to the pandemic, we as an entire industry. And one of the pieces of data we got back was that 8 in 10 Canadians feel Canada's agriculture and food system responded well, which is super cool, right? It means that they're confident in the fact that the supply chain is strong here. And yes, for a lot of Canadians, there was maybe 1 or 2 visits to the grocery store that seemed a bit sketchy. And then after that, it's been business as usual. And I think the thing last year that really hit home what happens when there's this new spotlight on us was how Canada responded to Canada's Agriculture Day. So this is another one of those big brands that I get to work on every single year. And Canada's Agriculture Day, as you can imagine, is a national celebration that happens every single year where the agriculture industry comes together and we celebrate the fact that we have these cool jobs. And Canada's Ag Day has been happening for 5 years. For the first 4 years, I think the success was amazing, but this year the success was a little bit different. So I guarantee there's some people on this call who have thought, yeah, Canada's Agriculture Day is cool, but what's it really doing? It kind of just seems like a day when a bunch of farmers are patting themselves on the back, but it's not really reaching outside of the agriculture industry. And I know a lot of people wish it did. I think this year, for the first time ever, it was mission accomplished and we were able to reach the average Canadian. And I have a little bit of a recap to show you. So it's pretty exciting. Canada's Agriculture Day became the #1 trending topic in Canada very quickly, actually before a lot of us even were sitting at our work desks. But it didn't just trend early, it trended the whole day. So from coast to coast, The number one thing that Canadians were talking about that day was Canada's Agriculture Day. For any nerds on the call, it actually trended for over 14 hours. It was the topic in Canada that people also talked about for the longest period of time. And it was very exciting. So it reached 35 million people, and it was talked about in 68 different countries, right? So there were people in France saying happy Canada's Egg Day to all my Canadian farm friends, right? There was people in like Uganda celebrating it. It was super cool. And for the team that helps to run this day, we actually had 10 of us that were monitoring social media that morning, and keeping track of the engagement was quite literally impossible, because at certain times in the day, if we're talking about peak hours, Canada's Egg Day, the hashtag, was mentioned every 1.9 seconds on Twitter. It was a nonstop click, 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 and it was a lot of fun. And I think a lot of the people on this call, you are probably involved in Canada's Egg Day in some form or another. You maybe participated in the OFA Burger Challenge, right? You posted on social media, you attended the Egg in the Classroom and Farm and Food Care Ontario farm tours that were happening, right? There was so much going on, and as an industry, we did a phenomenal job. But the thing I wanted to highlight today was what people outside of the industry did. And that's kind of what I think we should all be the most proud of. So there was CFL players like Adam Bighill celebrating, and big media companies like CBC getting involved. We saw a lot of big government officials getting involved, like Trudeau and Doug Ford, both making custom videos. Justin Trudeau actually went on multiple farm tours throughout the day, which is pretty fun. We saw big consumer-facing brands like TELUS and Scotiabank and McDonald's getting involved. And we also saw a bunch of different dietitians in big urban Canadian centers, places like Montreal and Halifax and Winnipeg and Toronto and Calgary, going on morning news and talking about the importance of Canadian food and celebrating Canada's Egg Day. So when we think about all this, it's incredibly exciting, right? And when we think about the success of Canada's Egg Day, why it's performed so well over the years, I would like to say it's because we apply the exact same communication principles that we've been talking about today. So if you look at any of the ways that Egg More Than Ever, when we're talking about Canada's Egg Day, are communicating with people, it's incredibly friendly. It's in the way that we talk to our friends. Like in this example here, we talk about our feelings, right? Like it makes it way more consumable for the end user when we're talking like this. In terms of celebrating people, we make sure that we're always highlighting real, actual Canadian farmers, and we never use stock. It's always real people, and the people who are taking these videos and these photos for us are usually also Canadian farmers. So this picture right here was actually taken by Katie McLeod, who is a Southern Ontario dairy farmer. I bet you a lot of you follow her on social media, Days Like This photos. She's incredible, but she's someone that we love to work with because she's one of our friends, right? She's one of Egg More Than Ever's good friends. And in terms of connecting one-on-one, we are always trying to make sure that we're strengthening our relationships with different advocates across Canada. And we're doing this in the dark. So we're talking with people in direct messages. We actually made a bunch of custom photos for people and reminded them that they're kind of leaders within the industry and that we value their voices and opinions. And some people, like Crystal, who you all probably recognize, also then took that piece of content and posted it herself, right? So these three communication principles that I talked about today, they're applicable to a lot of different ways that you can communicate. But in my experience, it's worked incredibly well on big social media initiatives like Canada's Egg Day. So let's do a little bit of a recap here. Lots of change in the last year. We are online longer than we ever have been before. And when we're online, it's for longer periods of time. Because of this, it can create overstimulation and confusion with the messages we're seeing. And when we're seeing messages, we also trust that information less than we ever have before, right? Also, when we go online, we might be a little bit overwhelmed or tired because we're all working so much. An extra 31 extra days of work last year, which is kind of crazy. So because of all these things, I think we can all agree there's barriers in the way of communication right now. But my best piece of advice, I'm not saying these are going to solve all of your issues, but they've worked for me, are these three communication principles. The overall theme here is to try our best to communicate with people the same way that we used to back when we could in person, right? So that's this idea of being friendly. So speaking to people the same way that you would as your friends, celebrating people. So trying to make sure that the people you're communicating with are the hero of your story, and connecting one-on-one. So instead of trying to reach a bunch of people at once, try to maybe have an impact or a really solid conversation with one person. Okay, so I hope we're all feeling a little bit better than we did at the beginning. I know COVID has created a lot of barriers for us, but it's also had to make us become a little bit more innovative and think a little bit differently, right? So this is what I had to talk about today, and I would love to answer any questions if anybody has anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isaac. That was amazing. I think you gave us all a lot to think about with your questions. Stuff we probably wouldn't normally have thought about on our own without somebody prompting us about, how simple it is to interact with somebody else if we just think about it as, a normal environment rather than this new, big, different thing that we're all dealing with. Also, some great tips in there. So really appreciate that. One of the things that I wanted to ask, and everyone, please feel free to share your questions in the chat window. We'll get to those. But you talked about trust in information. Can you give us a few more communication tips on how to build that trust, especially with this new norm that we're seeing with COVID?
Yeah, so when it comes to trust, a lot of people, when they're communicating, they seem to want to focus on the elite tips that will make them like crack the algorithm or improve their open rate. Kind of like what I said earlier, how a lot of people, when it comes to video chats, they want to know how to look better on the call or sound better, where realistically, that's kind of the least important thing. So when it comes to trust, especially on social media, don't focus on the time of day that you're posting. Don't focus on how to use the right hashtags to like crack the algorithm. Make sure that the piece of content that you've prepared is good. And if it's presented in a way that is digestible from the people that you're trying to reach, then they will engage with it and they will trust it. And yes, there are different social media platforms that are trusted more than others, but at the end of the day, all of us are on social media and we're reachable, right? I don't have the data in front of me right now, but I believe Facebook is very low on that list, as we can all agree right now. But yeah.
Awesome. Another question that we had come in is, how can we be more inclusive as an agriculture and food industry on social media? So you talked a little bit about that, just how much reach we had on Canada's Ag Day. How can we continue to bring that inclusivity to what we do on our social media platforms?
I think try our best to work together. And I know it's tough because all of us work for different organizations that have different corporate goals and different boards of directors and stakeholders. But I mean, in my experience, I'm definitely not the most grizzled vet on this call for sure. But in my short experience in the agriculture industry, when we can find ways to work together, that's when things work well. And Canada's Agriculture Day, to me, is kind of the prime example where we had companies all over Canada leading their own initiative that I had nothing to do with, right? Like Egg in the Classroom and Farm and Food Care Ontario and the OFA, right? All of there's so many groups that were doing cool things. If we can find ways to keep up that level of engagement throughout the year, that's the goal, right? I know getting it down to one day has been tough, but I think we're all confident in making Canada's Egg Day keep ramping up every single year. So how can we just keep that year round, right?
Definitely. I appreciate hearing that, because that's one of the things we've been trying to focus on this past year. Without partnership, I don't think that we would have had the impacts that we did this year. It's really been an emphasis on connections in a time where we feel so disconnected. So thank you.
Exactly. And a lot of the big cool initiatives that the agriculture industry wants to do, but we can't because we have so many different bodies, different organizations, things can be expensive. If we can find ways to kind of like pool our resources together, then we can do those cool things. We just have to do them as a team instead of one organization at a time.
Definitely. Thank you. Another question we had come in is, how easy is it to move that awareness and excitement in social media to action at home and in the community? Do you have some examples of how that might be possible?
How easy is it to move a clear message into actions?
Yeah, something, so we could build
Yep.
that awareness and excitement over social media. How do we make that actionable for people at home and in the community?
Make the desired action so easy. Like on Canada's Egg Day, the big learnings that we had was our first year, we were like, getting involved in Canada's Egg Day is easy. Host a webinar. It's like, that's not easy. That's actually super hard, right? That takes a lot of work. Like, as you all know today, this was a lot of work. So what we got it down to where it was, we would have everything laid out, all of the resources perfectly in place. So people had to click a button. There was even one year where we used a tool that allowed people to pre-opt in to sending out a tweet, so they could technically do their social media post 3 months in advance, and then they didn't even have to think about it on Canada's Egg Day. So how can, like, number one, have a cool message and get people excited, but number two, make it as easy as possible.
I like that. Yeah, thank you. Probably get a couple more questions in here. One other one we had come in is, do you have thoughts on how we can maintain the approval of consumers following the pandemic, so that we're not returning to pre-2021 levels?
I think we just need to find interesting ways to stay relevant. Like, we need people to keep thinking about us, essentially. We are constantly competing with Netflix documentaries, and the average person is learning about agriculture from Netflix and YouTube. And I think we have an opportunity to share our stories on those platforms from people. I mean, there's one thing that I've said for a long time is, in order for consumers to think about the egg industry in a better light, we need to really focus on transparency. And the best way to be transparent is to let a general Canadian consumer talk about the egg industry on our behalf. Instead of us always talking about it, we have really low levels of risk, and we use terminology that other people don't understand. If we can get an average Canadian talking about egg in their words, right? Then if we're talking about these communication principles, that's an incredibly effective way to keep egg relevant, right?
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. And one last question I had for you is, actually, we had another one come in from Debbie, so I'm going to use that one instead. What's your most memorable moment on social media? And she's got a particular one here, the bison story.
Okay, so I think what Debbie's asking here is, so I mean, some of you may remember this. There was a few years ago, like, the idea of going viral on social media is something that you can never plan. And usually when you plan to create something that's viral, it doesn't work. We posted a picture on our Egg More Than Ever English Facebook account about 3 years ago, and it got more engagement than the history of everything we had ever posted on Egg More Than Ever, every social media of all time, times like 10. And it was just a picture of a guy standing beside a bison. So in terms of, like, I don't think I have any advice there. That's just viral stuff happens, and you can't control it. It wasn't a specific time of day. It's not like the photo was that amazing. It just happened, and it seemed like every person decided to pick that up and share it. I think it had over 1 million shares. Like, think about that, 1 million shares. It was pretty crazy, but yeah.
And I want to follow that up, because you brought up a good point. Do you have an example of a time where, you had planned and hoped for something to do really, really well, but it didn't do as well as you thought it was going to? And what did you learn from that?
I think that happens all the time, consistently. And my biggest piece of advice with social media and Egg More Than Ever is where we tried to get to a point where we were doing less long-term scheduling. So in the past, we would try to make sure that our next month on social media was planned, but that means the stuff that we're posting could become irrelevant in the next 30 days when it's actually going out there. So what we tried to do was never have anything planned and just react to people day by day. And what that means is you have to continuously just test. And there's definitely way more losers than there are winners in that situation. Meaning, like, we'll have a post that does not perform well at all, but then the post that you post next will do better. So long story short there, keep testing, try new things, and that's kind of how you get the hang on social, right? And that's how you understand what your audience wants to engage with, what they care about, what they think is cool, instead of just posting what you think is cool.
That's good. Yeah, good advice. And with our panel coming up shortly, I wanted to ask you an ag education related question. How do you think we can use, and I know, this isn't your primary focus, but what are some ways you think we can use our presence to better equip ourselves in sharing with educators and making sure that what they're receiving is, science-based information, things like that, and make them excited about it?
Yeah, I mean, I know these conversations are already happening, and I know that you guys are doing this, but it's just finding new, innovative ways to be in the same places that these teachers are, and probably not in normal, formal education spaces. So instead of trying to push these resources through like teacher Facebook groups, maybe there's ways that we can push this information through like a mommy blogger that they follow, or like a dietitian that they follow, right? I think there's interesting ways that we can like bridge the gap through less obvious roads to get that information in front of them.
Awesome, thank you. That's super helpful. Gives us some stuff to think about as a team, and I think as an industry and partnerships in moving forward and how we can better communicate. I want to thank you again for your time so much today. Really appreciated it. I think there were a lot of great tips in there, a lot of good questions you asked us to think about ourselves, which is, I think, basically in doing your presentation, you were employing some of those key practices you were telling us are necessary. Ask questions to your audience, create that dialogue, get to know them. So thank you. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank FCC and all of our partners as well for supporting our programs and outreach this year. We've been really grateful. And in honor of your presentation and thanks, we're going to be making a donation to Second Harvest in supporting their continuing efforts during these challenging times, because we know food accessibility isn't the easiest for everyone right now. And
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Taylor.
Awesome. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to be turning things over now to our next portion of the event, which is our panel. And I'm happy to have Shauna McQuarrie, our Program and Resource Project Assistant, join the call here. And Shauna is going to be moderating the panel. Just a little bit about Shauna. She leads the curriculum development on our team with our partners and facilitates our professional development through the Business of Food e-learning course. She's also an active teacher ambassador in our program, which sends, as many of you will know, Ontario certified teachers into grade 7 to 12 classrooms virtually across Canada. Shauna holds a bachelor's degrees in both arts and education from Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and has focused extensively on literacy and curriculum development throughout her career. She is also a National Geographic certified educator and is passionate and committed to fostering food literacy and environmental stewardship, especially in Ontario's northern communities where she was raised. Shauna and her family are beekeepers in the Niagara region, and her role at AgScape has allowed her to bring her love for agriculture and teaching together as she works to encourage today's teachers and youth to take active roles in the agri-food sector. So thank you, Shauna, and I look forward to hearing from you and all of our awesome panelists.
Awesome, thank you. We're really excited today. I've had the pleasure in my time with AgScape. I started formally with them last year, and I've had the pleasure of working with these three panelists throughout my time so far at AgScape. And each of them just brings such a rich experience, a lot of wonderful knowledge, and I think it's going to be a really rich conversation today. So one of our panelists, first we have Monique Lackey. She's an elementary guidance and experiential learning teacher with the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board. She works in with grade 7 and 8 students and teachers and helps students discover who they want to become through career exploration, experiential learning opportunities, developing self and social awareness, and using technology. This year, she invited AgScape teacher ambassadors to present about careers in agriculture to many of those grade 7 and 8 students. I happened to be one of those. And Susan, one of our other panelists, was also one of those. So this is, it's like a meeting of the minds again. We're returning to each other. So thank you for being with us, Monique. And Susan Dueckman is one of our teacher ambassadors and is one of the most amazing, enthusiastic teacher ambassadors I've had the pleasure of working with. She's a 30-year veteran to teaching and retired from the Halton District School Board in June 2019. Most of her years were spent teaching geography at the high school level, but in her first few years of teaching, she actually helped to open a high school in the First Nation community of Kashechewan on the shores of James Bay. So you've had an adventurous career, Susan. Thank you for joining us today. And our third candidate is Jason Maisonville. Jason is a graduate, second-year teacher candidate and now graduate from the University of Windsor with a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and soon to be graduate from the University of Windsor Faculty of Education. Congratulations. As a soon-to-be Ontario certified teacher, Jason is currently completing his practicum placement at Essex District High School, where he is teaching grade 12 family studies. And as an aspiring geography and social studies teacher, he believes that quality information about food and agriculture can help him address curriculum objectives in addition to being relevant to his students' everyday lives. Jason is also a recent graduate from AgScape's Business of Food 101 and 102 courses, which I also had the pleasure of getting to know you through that. So thank you for being here today as well. So how this is going to work, I've got a few questions here. I'll sort of direct them to one of you, and then we can kind of move through if you guys have things to add to each other. I'm not going to put you on the spot if they all said what you were going to say. We've all been down that road with students, right? But then we'll just work our way through these, and then the last question I want everyone to answer. So thank you. Okay, so the first question I'm going to actually direct to Monique Lackey. What is something you found like enjoyable that has helped you grow as an educator this past year?
I think one of the most important things was to be able to use interactive software, such as things like Pear Deck and Nearpod, where all students are able to contribute answers. So as you said earlier, I support 39 classes across 10 schools. And so I don't have the ability to, build the same relationships as a classroom teacher does. So as a visiting teacher, I have 40 minutes to grab their attention and, try to get them to engage. And so one of the things I have done is using the interactive software. So that when I'm using Google Slides, there's questions that the students are answering, and this gives the chance for every student to answer. And rather than just picking on the 2 or 3 people who may, and I'm saying may, put up their hand, it gives everybody a chance to answer, and then we can pick the ones that we want to share, and so that people can also see others, their peers' responses. And it also creates some accountability as well. Because, and I remind them, I said, for the next 40 minutes, you're not anonymous anymore. I know who's participating, who's not. I know who's, what you're answering. And so I've just found that has been a really significant thing to do this year in order to, have that student engagement.
Awesome. Susan, do you have anything that you'd like to share or add to that one?
Yeah, thanks, Monique, for plugging Pear Deck. I really, I loved it when I was in a face-to-face classroom, and I love it even more now that I'm working directly with students online. So thanks for plugging that. But I think one of the things that I really find is helpful, especially when working with classroom teachers, is finding out how the lesson that they've requested actually fits into the curriculum that they're in the midst of. Like, are we starting a new topic with this particular lesson, or is this something that is augmenting what you've already taught? So having that relationship really helps helps the kids actually become a little bit more engaged, because then you can say, oh, do you remember when we talked about this in class last week? Then, how can we add to that? So I find that helpful.
Awesome. Jason?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Monique said at the beginning about technology, and that now that I've really been forced into using technology so much, I realize how many great opportunities are available using technology. In the past, I've seen technology used just for the sake of using it. But now we have no choice but to really make it excellent. So that's been an opportunity for us.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question kind of touches a little bit on some of those key strategies. So I'd love to hear, and maybe we'll start with Jason and kind of go backwards again. Some of those key strategies that you found helpful, as you face some of the challenges you've encountered this year. Love to hear.
Yeah. Strategy. Once again, I'm talking about technology. A strategy that I've had no choice but to get comfortable with is remaining absolutely calm and professional when technology doesn't cooperate, and being open to changing your activities or your schedule on the fly, because it's inevitable. And we all know, all of us here, we know that technology is not always our friend. So yeah, strategy, always remaining calm in the face of difficulties like that. Another strategy that I've picked up, this is more of an engagement thing, is, I don't know if any educators here have ever had this moment where you pose a question to your students and you don't get anything in response. That's frustrating.
It's like every day.
Every day. In the online world, we all know what that's about, right? And that's uncomfortable for everybody, right? That nobody wants their teacher nagging and begging them to respond. And no teacher wants to pose a question and get such a lukewarm response, right? So a strategy that I've used effectively lately is not showing, it's difficult, but not showing any frustration, not showing irritation. I can gently say, how about you think about that for a moment, folks? Or I can gently say, who wants to contribute? And then afterward, I can think myself, I can reflect on, what's a different way that I could have made that question so clear and so interesting that people would have wanted to respond? So those are strategies that I've had.
That's great advice.
In online education.
Great advice. Yeah, thank you. Susan?
I want to pick up, actually, I was caught the last bit of Isaac's talk here, and he talked about being genuine and being present, being there, and sort of involving. And so one of the strategies that I find helpful, two of them actually. The first thing is to get to the meeting a little bit early, and hopefully the teacher that you're interacting with is there as well. And having a bit of an informal conversation, asking, how's the weather where you're at? I'm down here in Southern Ontario. You might be up near Sudbury or Timmins. What's it been like for you up there? And then we can talk a little bit anecdotally. And as the students are coming into the meeting, they can hear me as a real person, not just some person vaguely out there, and sharing some of those anecdotes. And I find the same thing too, Jason, when you said that you get crickets on the other end when you ask a question and you hope for a response. Sometimes I find that in sharing an anecdote, a personal anecdote about my experience and what I would answer in that particular instance, starts the ball rolling with some students. They think, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking, and I didn't really want to say that. And then the third thing, of course, is what Monique answered before, is when you have a platform where students can share anonymously, like Pear Deck, then sometimes that also prompts them to be able to share their ideas or paste an idea, or even just open their microphone and say something. But I think being genuine is a real asset, especially because these kids have seen it all before. They're tired of this show that gets put on, from all kinds of other social media. They're looking for some genuine person to be there at the other side.
For sure. Monique?
Just to add one more thing to what Jason said first off, and even with those that silence, you have to also be comfortable with silence. You have to be honor that pause, because if you're just going to quickly, if you're just all of a sudden going to say, okay, well, we'll move on, you're giving everybody permission not to answer. So sometimes, it's uncomfortable as a teacher to sit back and wait for somebody to answer, but sometimes you got to do it. And that's when people will finally, and you know what, some people need that longer processing time. And we often end up picking on the kids who pick on their hand first, like even in a regular classroom scenario. But if we give, it's like, even in the regular classroom, I would say, don't anybody pick up your hand for the next 30 seconds. Because I want everybody to have the chance to think about an answer, because otherwise it's the people who, quickly respond every time that we always hear from. And I find that that's a good strategy. So even in this online world, be comfortable with silence. And and so but the strategy that I'm finding that I use a lot is giving permission to both teachers and students to be kind to themselves. There's a lot of expectations upon everybody right now, and especially if you compare yourself to a social media world where some teachers are doing everything perfectly, or some families are managing the whole online teaching experience perfectly, but nobody is. And so be gentle to yourself, don't compare yourself to anybody else, embrace embrace your current struggle, acknowledge it, and find the glimmers of hope. And maybe today's not the day that you want to learn how to code. When I come to your class and we're going to learn how to code, maybe that's and that's okay, because we all have our own struggles right now. And even this morning, like, I've been talking about gratitude for the past week and a half with my students, and a lot of times we see somebody complains about something, somebody else will say, but yeah, complain about their job, for example. Somebody else will turn around and say, yeah, well, at least you're lucky you have a job. But that's not serving anybody, because we need, even as students, we need to be able to say, what, this is hard. This is, I'm struggling right now. Because if we keep on being told that, yeah, but other people have it worse than you, you're constantly pushing those things aside and not embracing and recognizing what we're feeling right now. It is so easy to say, yeah, but you know what? People in World War II had it much worse. Yeah, they did. But this is our struggle, and this is what we're dealing with right now. So please, if you're struggling, speak up, say, name it, embrace it, and if you need help, get it. If not, what can you do to find gratitude in your day so that you can move on from this? So just that whole well-being is become paramount of my strategies this year.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of actually segues us into the next question, which is a little bit about moving forward. No, it's good. It's because it's about moving forward, and like, what are we going to take from this experience this year? How will we be able to use these experiences to help us as an educator moving forward? And I think the fact that our students are seeing the very real us, possibly for the first time, because we don't have it all together, that's a big deal. There's almost an extra layer of authenticity that maybe they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So anyways, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe we'll start with Susan this time. So how do you think you will use these experiences to help you as you move forward into the future, hopefully pandemic-free future?
One thing I've really learned how to do is be, I won't say proficient, but at least adequate on different platforms. I was not, for example, I was not a Google or a Microsoft Teams person. I don't have Microsoft anything at my house. I use Android, almost everything. I use a Chromebook instead of a PC kind of thing. So I had to really struggle with teaching myself how to use all these different platforms, because different school boards have different requirements, and not everybody has the same base that they work from with their students, and understanding that and being flexible with that. So now I'm as you said, being comfortable with the silence. I'm also comfortable with not having proficiency at everything, and I'll admit it, saying, oh man, I have no idea how this works. How do and I'll ask the teacher or ask even some of the students, and they're really helpful. They love it when they can give the teacher some advice about, oh, just find the microphone at the bottom of your screen, and in Microsoft Teams it's here, and in Google Meet it's there, and it's like, holy, there's a lot of stuff to learn. So the learning curve is steep, but I find it actually kind of fun to challenge myself with all kinds of new, different learning. It's fun.
So moving forward, it's probably even opened you up to the fact that, yeah, I can do those. I can do these hard things, right?
Yeah, it's just taking the time and spending it and feeling that this is okay.
Right.
It's all good. It's all good.
Awesome. Jason, would you like to add some?
Yeah, I agree with Susan that it's empowering in a way, yeah, to overcome some of these challenges and get help from your students and other teachers. A big takeaway for me, this will be obviously familiar to all the other educators, all of us and everybody else out there, is how important it is to connect. It's important to be professional at all times and also have warmth and personality and humor to get your students to really work with you during these these really difficult times. So moving forward, that's been very, very clear to me through all this. Respect is earned. You have to earn your students' respect, and sometimes it's a little bit challenging online. but it's still, it still has to be done. And it eases the whole teaching and learning process even when we're online.
Awesome. Monique, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I think and I've said this like so many times over the past year, if we don't come out of this as better educators, then we've set on an opportunity. We've had some, even with as far as curriculum, there's been, a lessening of the expectations as far as curriculum this year, because everybody knows that we're going through something. And so being able to look at the curriculum and figure out what's our key idea, what is it that we really want to learn from this. And I think that if we try to do things the way we've always done, but in a remote way, we've done ourselves a disservice and we've done our students a disservice. And so I'm going to give an example of a time when a teacher, she's a French teacher, and she was like, well, how can I do this? Because the students can't print this off. I'm like, well, what is it you want to do? And she said, well, they have to have this map and they have to put, different symbols on it for French. And I said, well, why don't you let them use Google Drawing, use Jamboard, use something where she said, yes, but then it's not fair to the students who spend more time drawing it. And that's what I said to her. I said, but where in the curriculum say that students need to, be assessed in their ability to draw? Like, how is this? I know that there's a communication between, drawing something and being able to comprehend it. But at the same time, if you're able to find a picture, where's it? And she wasn't having it. But it was just, we really need to rethink the way that we've assessed. We need to rethink, what's important. And if we don't take this opportunity, then we've missed out on a great opportunity to learn about, developing relationships, with our families, with our students and their parents, about knowing where they're coming from. Everybody, this is where we're seeing a huge inequity in education right now, in terms of what, support people have at home, but access they have to, viable Wi-Fi, whether they can go out and buy art supplies to finish that art project that the teacher wants them to do. And this is really seeing that inequity. And so we need to also to figure out how do we bring equity into how we're teaching. And I think this has really highlighted the differences, and we always make assumptions about the kids in our classroom. We really can't do that anymore.
Oh, very true. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit here. Like I said before, I have had the incredible pleasure of working kind of closely with all three of you over the past several months. So I'd love to hear about just your experience with AgScape, how AgScape has been able to support you, your students, whatever you have going on, your own personal, professional goals. Just if you could share a little bit about that with me, I would love that, and with everybody. And maybe we'll start with Jason.
Yeah, sure thing. So as you mentioned earlier, Shauna, I have taken the Business of Food course, both parts of that. I just finished up Business of Food, the second part, just last month I finished it. And I could speak volumes about the great things that I learned in the curriculum there. As you mentioned, I'm a geography and social science teacher. So a lot of that material in Business of Food connects directly right to the Ontario curriculum, right? So some things that I have in the pocket for generating and procuring content in the future. But a little bit more broadly, the Business of Food courses that I took, they really modeled for me good science communication, which is really, really important right now, especially with youth. They modeled for me showing quality information in a balanced way. And they showed, they modeled for me a very organized and professional and meaningful couple of courses that were done really well in Bright Space. So I'm very grateful to AgScape for giving me that experience with Business of Food.
Wonderful. And we look forward to supporting you as you continue your journey. You're at the starting line. This is exciting for us. A long partnership ahead with Jason. Susan, your teacher ambassador.
Yeah. I you know what, I kind of like to hook up with what Jason said too. A lot of information came out of those Business of Food courses that, I kind of wish I had that in my teaching career while I was teaching face-to-face. And I too, like you, Jason, I'm a geography teacher. I kind of wish I had some of that be in my back pocket, some of that factual information. So I can really appreciate how AgScape does the research. And so when we do present to our students, whichever lesson it happens to be, we can count on the research behind it. And because kids will ask the questions, they are up on social media, they read all kinds of things, they may have had things shared with them by either things within their curriculum from teachers or other students, or they've just read things online. And I like having the factual backup to the lessons that we present, knowing that it's been researched well. So I can appreciate that.
Maybe Monique?
Yeah, so like Shauna said at the beginning, my job is experiential learning, elementary guidance and experiential learning teacher.
It's a big title.
It's a mouthful. Around these parts, we're called EGALTs because the world is all about acronyms. But I usually go by elementary guidance because it's easier. But there's guidance and experiential learning. And so AgScape has really helped to support that. That role into like support my role, because one of the things which we try to get kids to think about is who they want to become and not necessarily what you want to be. And so a lot of times students get hung up on the traditional careers, doctor, lawyer, nurse, and or the ones we see on TV, the ones with the prestige, like athletes and CSI agents and things like that. And we don't think outside the box. And so, and I could stand up forever and say, hey, look at other alternatives. But even another approach I've been taking this year is to ask students, what problem do you want to solve? So not necessarily even, because if you think about what do you want to be, like, I don't know. But if you start with what problems do you want to solve? And then looking down from that, because, when we think of if feeding the world is one of the problems we want to solve, it's not just the farmers that's doing that. And, helping students see the interconnectedness of all the different disciplines. And so like any problem needs to be solved as an interdisciplinary approach. And so, but I think a lot of times we just think about, like finding a cure for COVID. It's the scientists that are doing that. Yeah, but what about the researchers? What about the marketing people? What about the people who are distributing? What about the health professionals? All these, and there's so many people that are involved in that process. And so by bringing introducing students to the world of agriculture, from the careers in agriculture, they're all of a sudden like, oh my goodness, I thought agriculture was just about the farmers in their overalls dropping seeds in the field. They had no idea of the magnitude of careers that were involved, and the fact that it's one of the largest employers. I think it is the largest area of employment in the entire world. And I also remind students that by the year 2050 our world population is going to grow to 10 billion people. How are we going to feed all these people? And so just getting them thinking about different opportunities, and that feeding the world doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to plant seeds. There's a lot of other things, and that's why AgScape has really helped in that area for me, because coming from somebody else other than me saying it is helpful.
Always nice to link arms with each other, right?
Absolutely.
Share the
our expertise.
Yeah, well, and it's funny as you bring this up, another from one of our conversations that we had while Susan and I were presenting in those classes, one of the things that you said to me really sat with me, and it's something that I've used a lot since then. And it was not, like we say, not asking the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up, but what might you want to do first? Right? Like there's steps to where you end up in your career. I certainly did not know agricultural educator was a thing when I was first becoming a teacher, right? So like, you just don't know where that life path is going to take you, but you do have your interests and your passions and your curiosities and things at that young age. So yeah, I really valued my experience connecting with you in our little chats that we had before every lesson. And I think you guys are doing good work over there for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so if there's anything else that you guys would like to add, I know there's a few questions in the chat, and I think Taylor's actually going to hop back on here. If there's any last things you'd like to add, we could maybe just start back with Monique and go to Susan and then Jason quickly, and then Taylor, if you want to hop back on with the questions, we can do that.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I just want to kind of reiterate what I was just talking about. And if you have any students in your life or people who are, trying to figure out where they want to go, have them, actually look at who that is they want to become. There's a lot of pressure that's put on kids to make decisions in high school or even elementary school already about what do you want to do with the rest of your life. And, nobody stays in the same career for their entire life anymore, and helping students realize that, what, we can do different things. Start with something. If you don't like it, move on to something else. It's okay, but really understanding who we are is really, really, really important. And if you have any, people in your life who are looking through that transition, ask them that question. Who is it you want to become? Do you want to become somebody who helps others? Do you want to be somebody who builds something? Do you want to be somebody who, and also the whole concept of university isn't the best option. University is one leg of a three-legged tripod, and have college, university, and the skilled workforce. And people need to see that one isn't better than the other. It's whatever pathway takes you to where you want to get to. That's the pathway you need to take. Too many people go to university because it's the prestige thing to do. It's the and their parents force them into it. We need to have serious conversations about the workforce of our future, because it's not all about you. And so, being willing to say, yeah, you know what, going to school, that's a great idea. I don't care. My son had a 90 coming out of high school, and he's a gas fitter, and he's happy as can be, and he went into it straight out of high school. And while his other friends are still in second year university, he's already has a full-time job. So, what, awesome. We have to press that conversation about the future of our workforce. So
awesome. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, I without reiterating everything that Monique said, we do need to pay attention to where our kids are coming from, and take that pressure off of them. I've got 3 grown children of my own, and same thing, they all had very different paths to get to where they are now, which, at some point I can remember my daughter telling me, I am never going to be, go into geography or environmental science. I was a geography teacher, of course. I am not doing that. I'm not doing that. And she jumped around a little bit and ended up with a career that is closely related to agriculture and environmental science as well. So you just have to let them do that bouncing around, and not put that pressure on our students to make those choices, especially early. I mean, oh my goodness, I remember leaving high school not knowing a thing about what I wanted to do. I had no idea. My parents had one idea, I had something else. I had no idea at all. But the second thing I also wanted to comment on is that, we're a year into this pandemic now, and the students have been bounced around from face-to-face learning to online to hybrid models to cohorts to quadmasters. Like, they're just being all over. We're tired. Educators are tired. Students are tired. And so, I know it's a last push to the end of the school year coming up right now, but we need to recognize that we're all, tired of this way of learning, and we need to recognize that, and honor the fact that sometimes silence is good, sometimes easy is good, sometimes relaxed is good, and just be flexible with what our students need, and what our educators, what our teachers need from us as well. Maybe it's just they're getting this one class reprieve from actually being the person on deck. And if we can give that to our educators and support them in that way, then we're doing good.
Awesome. And Jason?
Yeah, just really quick, I'm really glad that Monique and Susan, you both brought up the piece about careers. I'm going to refer to my experience in business of food once again. Shauna, you've seen in just about every module, there's pieces about careers related to agriculture that I now know about, that I never even thought about before, that I can share with my students. As a new teacher, chances are at some point in the next decade, I'm going to have to teach civics and careers. So it's not that every student is going to join. It's not that every student is going to join the agricultural field, but it is important for me to know, for students who may not know about careers that really would interest them. So yeah, thank you, Monique and Susan, for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you to all of you for joining us today. And then I think I'll invite Taylor back for some final words, questions, thoughts.
Yeah, I'm here. And I think we have a little bit of time for question and answers from the audience. So if you have any questions for our panelists around ag education, educating in a virtual world, please feel free to put those in the chat. One question that I had that I thought tied into a lot of what you were already saying is, from an industry perspective, how can we support teachers and students now in connecting with agriculture and food in authentic ways? So we've talked about a little bit about what AgScape does, but what more can we do as an entire industry to support that authentic connection?
I think it's probably a great question for Jason, as he's just starting to line those pockets with tools for a career.
Yeah, yeah, you know, I think that the information that AgScape has to share with educators is really, really great, and I just wish that more educators could have it. I'm not sure if that would look like through professional development opportunities or workshops, or, you know, I know social media presence is a really big important thing. Yeah, getting the information out to educators in any way that the organization sees fit, I'm sure would be much appreciated. And it's so valuable, even beyond social studies and the food and nutrition class. It's valuable to everybody.
Monique or Susan, do you have anything to add to that?
I do actually. I think like virtual field trips, like, you know, I've seen a couple like with like trips to like maple syrup farms and stuff like that. But you know, we don't have those opportunities. Even in a regular world, we don't have a lot of opportunities to do those types of things. And so sometimes students don't see because they don't know what they don't know, right? And so giving them those opportunities to see, you know, agriculture in action. So a variety of different of virtual field trips to expose students to things, and it doesn't have to be individual to the class. It can be like, you know, 2 o'clock on Wednesday, take a virtual field trip to, you know, a processing plant, whatever, you know what I mean, like a food process, I don't know, whatever, but just to give those opportunities and that teachers can easily sign up for. I think that would be something that'd be very helpful.
What I'm hearing, Taylor, is that we're on the right track.
Yeah. I like that field trip idea, Monique. I was just, as you were describing that, I thought, oh yeah, that's so cool, because I don't know very much about farming per se as a farmer, and I was really appreciative. Last week we had some of our training sessions and we had a couple of virtual tours of different dairy farms, and it was really neat to see 2 different dairy farmers who from within our ranks who were sort of showing what they did on their farms. And it's just, again, it's real, it's not pretense, it's real, it's here's what happens. And you know, I think students would really appreciate those kinds of experiences.
Well, it lends itself to the authenticity of that moment, like Isaac was talking about earlier. So definitely.
Yes, exactly.
And you're all educators here. As you know, industry people, I think we probably all find ourselves in certain situations where we have to step into that role as educator, in connecting face-to-face with students or teachers. Any best practices or tips that you can share with us? I know it's a bit of a different world right now, but I think there's some tools that are kind of, there's some tips that last throughout even the virtual world.
I'm gonna leave the floor open for that one.
I would say like find multiple entry points, like, you know, high engagement, and, you know, some students are going to know more than others about certain things. So make sure that you're connecting to students on a multitude of different levels, because for some people, they've never been out of the city, you know, and that, like, I you know, I'm Mississauga, Brampton area. There's a lot of kids who've never been in the city. They've never seen an animal in real life. And so to make assumptions, if you're teaching about, you know, anything with regards to agriculture, you could be talking about China right now, you know what I mean? And it is so different from their lived experiences. And just knowing that, you know, that you're going to have people from a variety of different experiences and not make assumptions about what they may or may not know.
Anyone else?
I would like to just, jump in there too. Meet kids where they are. We have kids, as you say, Monique, from different lived experiences, but they also have different beliefs and value systems too. And so recognizing that you are going to have students in your class who are vegetarian or vegan, or, you know, might have different, you know, kosher, whatever the thing is, and knowing and understanding those entry points into the understanding of what goes on with our food helps smooth over and helps explain some of the challenges what we face in the agriculture industry.
Yeah, if I may, I did have something to add on that as well. On the topic of stepping into the role of educator, The big thing that I think about that comes to mind is knowing your audience as best as you can. Connecting with whether it be with educators or with students, knowing their interests and kind of where they are in their life, how what AgScape has to offer can really connect to them, really strike a chord with them.
Yeah, I think as agricultural educators, one of the big things that we're always doing is making room for all sides of the conversation. I mean, that's really at the heart of what we do in the Teacher Ambassador program. And for me, when I'm teaching, it's about giving the kids the confidence to make whatever food decisions are right for them, right? Like, it's so that they are armed with that information and they don't get like the analysis paralysis in the produce section because there's too many choices and I don't know what the right one is to choose. It's just about, like you say, meeting them wherever their experience of life is and just helping them build that confidence. I think that's the big thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I want to give really a huge thanks to all of you, because we know just how much work our educators are going through right now in order to bring those lessons to students in an ever-shifting environment. But I also want to thank you for sharing your experiences today and for giving us some thoughts on how we can connect authentically with students and bring that education into the classroom on agriculture and food. In recognition of your time today, we'd also like to make a donation, again, on all of your behalfs to Second Harvest to support our communities during these trying times. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks so much. Enjoy your day, everybody.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to be concluding our event for today. I want to share a huge thank you again to our speaker and panelists for providing us with their time and insights. Again, thank you to the OFA for sponsoring today's panel and helping us to continue to have collaborative conversations. And thank you to P&H Milling for allowing us to make this virtual event happen through their support of our broadcast. But this is really a thanks to all of our members, sponsors, supporters. Thank you for allowing us to achieve the success that we have this year. We wouldn't be here sharing these awesome stories, and we wouldn't have been able to make the shifts that we did over the last year without you. So thank you, everyone, and all our guests today who have joined us and continue to support AgScape, especially during these challenging times. We're grateful for each and every one of you and hope that you'll join us for the remainder of our AGM and 30th anniversary. Our next live session is going to be AgScape's AGM business meeting, and that's taking place on May 5th. In the meantime, we hope you all stay safe and that we'll see you again soon. Thank you.